Chapter 1. Roots, the Presence of the Past. In 1776, at Weyanoke on the James River in Virginia, Mary Armistead married her fiancé, John. With all that was going on in America that year, it didn't make headlines. She was only 15 and John was nearly 30, but age gaps like that were fairly normal in the 13 colonies. In many ways, they were a classic example of rich Virginians at the time. Mary was the only daughter of wealthy parents and stood to inherit the beautiful family estate on the edge of Chesapeake Bay, while John had attended William and Mary College, shared a room with Thomas Jefferson, started practicing as a lawyer, and then served a stint in the Continental Army before being appointed as a judge. Together, they had 8 children. Unusually, in an age of high infant mortality, all 8 of them survived into adulthood. Although John became governor of Virginia, the chances are that most of us would never have heard of the family were it not for their 6th child, born in 1790, and also named John. He was a frail boy, wafer-thin and prone to bouts of diarrhea with which he struggled his whole life. But he followed his father into law and local politics, and gradually climbed through the ranks until on April 4th, 1841, John Tyler became the 10th President of the United States. 4 years later, he signed into law the annexation of Texas. Curiously, that is only the 4th most remarkable thing about him. The 3rd is that he served the longest presidential term in history without being elected, stepping into the role after William Henry Harrison died just a month into his term. The 2nd is that he got married in office, the first of only 2 presidents to do so, after his first wife suffered a stroke and died in the White House. And the 1st, which sounds like it cannot possibly be true for someone who predated the metric system and whose parents were courting during the Battle of Lexington, is that as of 2022, one of his grandsons is still alive. Harrison Ruffin Tyler still lives in Charles County, Virginia, where his great-grandparents were married in 1776. He's well into his 90s. Born in 1928, just before the Jazz Age and the Roaring Twenties gave way to the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression, Harrison was in elementary school when Hitler came to power and secondary school when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Like anyone of his generation, he's seen astonishing change, both technologically, televisions, atom bombs, the moon landing, the internet, and politically, World War II, Indian independence, the Chinese Revolution, decolonization. But the social changes he's witnessed are even more dramatic. Just 1 year older than Martin Luther King, Harrison lived to see the election of Barack Obama and the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, despite having had a father who defended the Confederacy and a grandfather who owned 70 slaves. Harrison's father, Lyon Gardner Tyler, lived through an even more seismic period of world history. He learned to read and write before the US Civil War, in a state where people owned slaves but not light bulbs. China was in the midst of the Taiping Rebellion, in which 30 million people died. Japan was a feudal society under the shogun and the samurai. Karl Marx was working on Das Kapital in the reading room of the British Museum, and David Livingstone was exploring the Zambezi River. Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species when Lyon was 6. The vast majority of the world's population worked on the land, with an average life expectancy of 29. By the time Lyon died, the Second Industrial Revolution had swept across the world, bringing electricity and indoor plumbing, telephones and movies, factories and skyscrapers, planes, trains and automobiles. Global life expectancy was above 40 and rising rapidly. Women in dozens of countries were going to university, gaining equality under the law, and voting. Lyon's father, John, would have struggled to cope with the world of his children, let alone his grandchildren. They, and we, would have struggled to live in his. John came into the world on a slave plantation, a few weeks after George Washington's first State of the Union and 9 months into the French Revolution. He was a toddler when Beethoven was first commissioned to write music, and when Mary Wollstonecraft published A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. As John grew up, his days were continually punctuated by revolution, from the Reign of Terror in France, 1793-4, to the Latin American Wars of Independence, 1808-33, to the overthrow of nearly all European governments in 1848,